In honor of Jewish Book Month, JBS presents the Hampton Synagogue's Author Discussion Series with Rabbi Avraham Bronstein.
Tonight's guest, Esther Amini, is a writer, painter, and psychotherapist in private practice. Her short stories have appeared in Elle, Lilith, Tablet, The Jewish Week, Barnard Magazine, Washburn University's Inkscape Literary Journal, and Proximity. She was named one of Aspen Word's 2 best emerging memorists and awarded its Emerging Writer Fellowship in 2016 based on her memoir, Concealed, and was chosen by Jewish Women's Theater as their artist in residence in 2019. Her pieces have been performed by Jewish Women Theater in Los Angeles and in Manhattan. Tonight, Esther will be discussing Concealed, memoir of a Jewish Iranian daughter. Rhonda Spinnick, artistic director of Jewish Women's Theater, calls Concealed a moving, honest, and compelling memoir that unveils the little-known world of Persian Jewish immigrants in America. Amini's characters leap off the page right into your heart. Please welcome Esther Amini.
Esther, it's good to have you.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
Absolutely. So you had said you were going to begin the conversation tonight with a reading. So I'd just like you to set that up. What are you going to be reading?
Okay.
Just set the scene for the audience.
All right. Well, the book has many different emotions running through it. And it is about growing up in this country as first-generation American. And as you already heard, my parents came from the city of Mashhad, the Iranian city of Mashhad. And they arrived here shortly after World War II. I was born a few years later. So there are many culture clashes, many misunderstandings of culture. And so I thought I would read something humorous and light. It comes from the chapter called Kosher at Christmas. Mom was a Radio City Music Hall Rockette junkie. The Christmas Spectacular, starring the Radio City Rockettes, was our yearly December ritual. Months ahead, she'd stand in line to buy 2 tickets smack in the center of the orchestra section. On the day of the performance, pressed into a hooded snowsuit and galoshes, I'd hold her hand as we slogged through snow, heading to the subway. A sign in the theater's lobby warned in bold black letters, "No food from outside permitted." When I translated the English into Farsi, Mom shot back, "So what?" "So what?" was her trademark reply. No one was going to tell her what she could or could not do, not even Radio City Music Hall. Each year, we'd sit in the center of this heavily gilded, Art Deco, 6,000-seat theater watching the Christmas Spectacular and strictly keeping kosher. Mom's eyes devoured the show. In Mashhad, she never saw rows of synchronized, semi-nude females bouncing uniformly and high-kicking their lean legs to Winter Wonderland, White Christmas, and I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus. Studying the straight line of broad, smiling dancers in their scanty red and white Santa Claus outfits topped with pom-pom hats, her lips would part as she slid another glazed almond into her mouth. Stealthily, reaching into our smuggled-in brown bags, we'd munch on Mom's homemade walnut cake, her non-brangie, and her oven-roasted glazed almonds, we duck our heads discreetly sipping from cans of red cheek apple juice. Watching the leg-swinging dancers, I secretly chewed, secretly swallowed, secretly drank, expecting to be caught and handcuffed. Each of our sneaked-in snacks reminded me I was Iranian, Jewish, kosher, and an outlaw. For Mom, consequences were inconsequential. She remained cool and calm. I sweated for the two of us. After a quick change of stage scenery, the Christmas Spectacular's highlight would begin: the living nativity. Trumpets, saxophones, flutes, violins, cellos, drums, and cymbals heralded the birth of Christ. The audience would gasp as the theater darkened and an ultramarine sky studded with twinkling stars enveloped the stage. Shepherds, kings, and the three magi paraded across the stage with sheep, camels, and a donkey to stand shoulder to shoulder before the Virgin Mary, Joseph, and the baby Jesus, welcoming the haloed Son of God. Women to my left and right rapidly crossed themselves while fingering their rosary beads. Nuns in black and white habits shut their eyes and entered a meditative trance. My mother thought nothing of letting me watch scantily clad dancers high kick on stage, but a celebration of the birth of Christ was something different. Esther, don't look, she'd whisper in Farsi. This is asur. Just eat your cake. I did as told. I shut my eyes to orchestra, Magi, Mary, Joseph, baby Jesus, Christmas carols. It made no sense. Mom was telling me to enjoy the show, but ignore Jesus. Pretend he wasn't there. But he was. He was the whole show. I had seen the pageantry, heard the music and singing. Even with closed eyes, the living nativity lived in my mind like a 3D movie. I couldn't turn off. I slouched down, curled into a ball of nerves, and bit my nails. I'm sinning scrolled across my brain. If my Hebrew school teachers see me now, they'll kick me out of class, tell me never to return. What if one of them is here, spying on me? Sinking down deeper in my seat, I hid. During the birth of Christianity, I chomped on Mom's dense walnut cake and stared at my tightly laced Buster Brown saddle shoes, concentrating hard on remaining Jewish.
Thank you. So I'm wondering about the genesis of the book. So I'm not going to ask you, kind of how it ends, right? We know how it ends. You're here. Right? That's obviously the conclusion of the book. But I'm wondering how the story started. Was this memoir something you had been thinking about doing for a very long time that's been kind of building? Was there some sort of epiphany or event that made you think, I really have to write all of this down now? What was the process that inspired you to set your life story down this way?
There were many converging forces. I can't simplify it down to one. Growing up, I would listen to my mother's stories. She was a big talker. She was very candid and open about her childhood and about life in Iran, and so I was listening all the time, sponging it in. So the story built. As I grew, I heard more from various people. My brother Albert, who's here in the audience right now, was a very big help, and he contributed and told me, shared many of his memories because he remembered Iran. He remembered the Exodus, which was torturous, leaving right after World War II, and life in India, where they were stuck for over a year. So a lot I did learn from family. I also did a lot of research. But I think what really propelled me into doing this was the feeling that people don't know the story. People don't know about the Jews from Mashhad, and it's a shame. And maybe if I told my story, beginning with the background and bringing it through up till today, the Jews of Mashhad will also be on the map. If you say to educated Jews, about the Moranos of Spain, they nod. Oh, sure. You say the Jews of Mashhad, they look at you very blankly. And it's because we haven't told the story. We haven't written firsthand accounts of what it was like to be there, to come here. And I think it's very important that the story of the Mashhadi Jews gets woven into the tapestry of the Jewish story, the global, international Jewish story. And we've been left out. And part of it is our doing. Part of it is that we have not spoken and written about it.
I want to revisit part of what you responded to in your last answer. You spoke about going back and speaking to your mother, speaking to your brother, other family members, trying to go around and get different perspectives on the story and incorporate them into your own experiences. What was it like for you going back to so many family members? What were their reactions when you told them that you wanted to write this memoir? Were they generally forthcoming? Was there any kind of revisited trauma that came up over the course of it? Were some people easier to talk to than others? Just describe the experience of going back and asking so many people that you're so close to about such a traumatic event or such a traumatic series of events in their recent past.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I was collecting information over time, so it wasn't all within the last 5 years when I sat down and wrote the book. But aside from speaking directly to my brother Albert and getting information directly from Albert, aside from him, I kept it really private that I was writing this. I think it's very important when you write that you don't necessarily inform other people, because it's important to remain in some kind of private space so that you can do this as freely and authentically as possible. So I didn't want to hear other people's feedback. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to see the smiles, and I didn't want to hear the disapprovals, and I didn't want to see any kind of facial expression or hear any tone of voice that would interfere in my own process. So I kept myself rather insulated after collecting the information, which I did over a lifetime. And I think that's the best way to write, to really write for yourself, from yourself, and I think it rings true that way.
So then what's it been like now that the book is finished and those same family members you've been sharing stories with are reading your official version of what happened? What's that experience? What's the experience of that been like for you?
It's been fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Family, friends, they've been supportive. They've been very, very happy that I've actually penned the story, that I have left it behind for future generations, that the world is being informed as to who the Mashhadi Jews were and how much they suffered, what they endured, and how victorious and heroic they were in many, many ways. So I have been receiving appreciation, but aside from family and friends, the book has taken flight, and I get emails from Australia, from London, from Italy, from the Midwest, from Canada, from South America. These are people who are reading the book and identifying with it, which is astounding for me, because the story is very specific. And what I've discovered is the more specific you get, and the more idiosyncratic a story is, the more universal it is. It seems to speak to so many in different ways. So it's been very warmly received.
So I was going to ask you, actually, what do you think about the Mashadi experience, the Mashadi, quote-unquote, Marano experience in Iran, and then the Mashadi immigrant experience in America is so universal or touches on a chord that relates to so many people who can relate their own experiences to it? You're almost saying the opposite, right? You're saying that the story is so specific that it's interesting for that. So maybe I'll rephrase that as a question, right? Do you think there's something universal about the Mashadi story, or do you think that it's interesting just because it's so unique and so idiosyncratic?
You know, someone read the book and said to me, Esther, this is an American story. And I had to stop and think and say, you're right. It's an American story. It's an immigrant story. America is composed of immigrants. And it is about being an outsider. It is about coming here for freedom. In my family's case, it was for religious freedom. It is the struggle to adapt, incorporate aspects of America, and at the same time hold on to traditions that you revere, and finding some way to create that balance. Growing up with parents who were enmeshed in the Mashadi world and wanting to hold on to your parents, wanting to honor them, and at the same time wanting to honor your own aspirations, to honor your own individuality. How do you do that? I mean, this is an immigrant story. So whether it's Mashhad or you're coming from Europe or South America, a lot of the themes are the same. How do you somehow appease parents who feel they belong to another world and at the same time live in this world? And that's what a lot of people were responding to. I mean, there's a young girl who lives in Kansas on some corn farm, and she wrote to me and she said, that's my story. And I said to myself, what? I mean, she's not Jewish, she's not Persian. How can that be her story? And the more I thought about it, it really is like the skeletal structure of the story that rang true for her.
So what that reminds me of, to a certain degree, last summer, maybe 2 summers ago, we screened a movie here at the synagogue about the legacy of Fiddler on the Roof. And one of the scenes in that movie was an interview with an English teacher in South Korea who taught Fiddler on the Roof and put on a production of Fiddler in South Korea. And one of the students who was acting in that production asked this English teacher, right, who was American born, obviously, but living in South Korea, do they get this in America?
Exactly.
Right? So there's something universal about it.
Yes, yes.
I'm going to ask you, over the course of writing the book and doing the history and working through your own life experiences, was there anything that really jumped out and surprised you? Was there anything that maybe turned out to be much more important or significant than you had realized before? Is there something that changed? Did you change your mind about anything dramatically over the course of writing the book? Did something kind of click in a way where as you were writing it, you said, oh, now I get what that was about, or now I understand what that meant in a way that you really didn't before?
I think that's a very good question. I have often talked about my past, and writing is a whole different experience. When you write, suddenly memories surface that you didn't have access to before, and configurations come together. It's a very different kind of creative process, writing versus speaking. But I think to answer you most accurately is to say, I grew up feeling I had so many discordant parts in me, so many oppositional parts, be it Iran versus America. The value systems are diametrically opposite. Be it a very rebellious, outspoken mother and a very withdrawn kind of medieval father. Diametrical opposites. And being Iranian, Jewish, American / a hybrid, feeling incongruent. They're all incongruent. And I think writing brought it all together. I think it brought together all those opposing parts and helped me feel that they live side by side. And discord can live side by side. And there's a lot to be said for a life that wasn't harmonious. It fed me and it helped me grow. My parents were not a united front. They often opposed one another. There's a lot to be said for being raised by parents who are not a united front. The whole idea of hearing one position and then hearing an extreme other position and then having to, over time, find my own position. It catapulted me forward. I didn't feel it as a child. I didn't feel it as an adolescent. But I later, as an adult, grew to appreciate the differences and that I feel what was the best of my father and the best of my mother and found a way to knit it together and make it a part of me. And all of this became clearer as I was writing.
I think then you're almost anticipating my next question to a certain degree. And the question is, obviously the history of the Jews of Mashhad and their experience is central to the book. That's a major takeaway that you want readers to come away with. Right? Just to know the history, to know the story, to understand what happened to all of those people from that community and how they relocated to America and reestablished themselves here. But I'm wondering about the your life aspect of the memoir. What do you want readers to come away with? What's the takeaway message of your life as you present it in the book? Or is there one?
Well, I didn't write with a prescriptive message in mind. I don't like books that have prescriptions, and it's certainly not formulaic in any way. I think I'd have to rephrase what you said. For me, this is a memoir, and it was really primarily about me growing up within this context. So I needed to share with the reader the background. And I needed the reader to understand the Mashhadi struggles, the world, the life, the history that came here with my parents and what I was born unto. So that's more of the backdrop. The foreground is really what it was like for me to grow up as an American, but feeling very Persian internally. Being able to pass as an American very well, but hearing the thump and the expectations and the demands of the Mashhadi culture within me. And there are lots of ups and downs in the story. There are highs and lows. There are comedic moments and painful moments. And when I reread what I wrote, my takeaway is that life is a series of reinterpretations. How I first interpreted childhood through the eyes of a child, how I then interpreted my life as an adolescent, how I then interpreted it as a young adult, and now later in my senior years, how I look back and think about it. It is a series of interpretations, and you have to be open to reinterpreting your life. And in retrospect, I'm very, very grateful for all the obstacles that I had and what felt like struggles back then, because they fortified me and they worked for me, not against me, ultimately. So I hope that readers, when they read the book, will get a few chuckles, will get some insight into the Mashhadi Jews, will be inspired and feel very hopeful in terms of their own lives.
Here, we'll open it up to questions from the audience.
Having collected the stories for so many years, and now having finally put pen to paper and produced the book, how do you feel personally? Do you feel like you've given birth to a child? I mean, obviously you're proud of the book, and from all of the comments, you well should be. But do you feel better now about these experiences, having had the opportunity to examine them?
Absolutely. It is like giving birth to a child, and a very significant child, because this child will live forever, and this child is immortal, and this child will inform others for generations to come. So it's a feeling of deep, deep fulfillment. It was a lot of work, and it was very hard, and a lot of it was the emotional struggle, to access the memories, to put them down. When you have to access those memories, you have to relive them in order to write about them. So there's a lot of work that goes into a memoir. It's very, very hard. But I'm very grateful that I did it, and it feels like it's one of the most significant things I feel that I've done with my life. So thank you for asking that question.
I think on that note, it's a really great note to say thank you for being here. Thank you for discussing the book with us.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.